She asked the same question over and over until Karoline had enough. What happened next sent shockwaves through the entire room. The Washington, D.C. briefing room was electric with tension. A row of cameras stood like silent sentinels at the back, their lenses gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights, all trained on the podium where Karoline Leavitt stood. The polished wood surface of the podium reflected a hint of her composed but commanding presence. She had handled tough press conferences before, but today was different. The air was thick, charged with something unspoken. Anticipation, confrontation, maybe even a storm brewing beneath the surface. Journalists packed the room, their notepads open, pens poised like daggers, ready to carve out the next explosive headline. The faint rustling of paper, the occasional muffled cough, and the subtle hum of whispers created an almost theatrical prelude to what was about to unfold. Karoline took a steady breath, adjusted the microphone, and spoke, her voice smooth and unwavering. "Good afternoon, everyone. Let's begin." A flurry of movement. Hands shot up, some hesitantly, others with the urgency of sharks sensing blood in the water. The hunger for controversy was palpable. She pointed to a familiar face in the crowd, a senior journalist from a major news network. His question was expected, predictable, a standard inquiry about the administration's tax policies. Karoline answered with her well-rehearsed response, measured, articulate, precise. Another hand, a follow-up question about education reform. Again, she responded effortlessly, her confidence unwavering. But then, a voice cut through the crowd, sharp, loaded, unmistakably aggressive. Miss Leavitt, let's talk about the real issue here." A hush fell over the room. Heads turned toward the speaker, as if an unspoken signal had passed through the crowd. Karoline knew the voice instantly, a journalist notorious for pushing boundaries, making waves, not for uncovering truth, but for creating spectacle. She leaned slightly forward, her gaze locking onto the woman in the front row, smirking. Calculated, ready. "Go ahead," Karoline said, her tone controlled but firm. "Do you believe this administration is actively suppressing marginalized communities? Because the data suggests..." A ripple of movement in the room. Eyes darted from Karoline to the journalist, back and forth like a slow-motion tennis match. Karoline's grip on the podium tightened ever so slightly, but her face remained unreadable. She had seen this tactic before. She raised a hand, calm, controlled. "I've addressed this before. Our policies aim to benefit all Americans, regardless of background. If you have a question related to today's topic, I'm happy to discuss." The journalist leaned in further, a predatory gleam in her eye. She wasn't finished. "So, you're refusing to answer directly? Why avoid a simple yes or no? Are you afraid of the truth?" The tension in the room spiked. A shift. Subtle but undeniable. The journalists in the back exchanged glances. The ones in the front leaned forward, sensing a moment. An opportunity. Even the cameramen adjusted their angles, zooming in, waiting for a slip, a misstep, something that could become the clip of the day. Karoline inhaled slowly. This wasn't about the question. It never had been. She met the journalist's gaze head-on, unwavering, coldly analytical. "I'm not afraid of anything. I am, however, not going to let this briefing be derailed into a spectacle. If you have a relevant question, I will answer it. Otherwise, I will move on." A murmur swept through the crowd. A few reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks, a telltale sign that the moment was escalating. The journalist's smirk grew. She was pushing, and she knew it. "So, just to be clear," she said, "are you refusing to answer because you can't? Or because you don't want to?" The temperature in the room dropped. A few heads turned toward each other. Was this the moment? Karoline's jaw tensed. The challenge was clear. This wasn't a press briefing anymore. This was a battle of dominance. Her fingers curled slightly against the podium. She took a breath. "I refuse to engage in bad faith arguments. That is not what this room is for." A veteran journalist in the second row whispered something to his colleague. "This isn't reporting. It's performance art." But the journalist wasn't backing down. She leaned in even closer. Her pen tapped against the desk. Calculated, waiting. "You're avoiding accountability. The American people deserve direct answers. So, let's be clear. Are these policies harming vulnerable communities? Yes or no?" The silence in the room was no longer passive. It was charged. The The moment stretched, an invisible thread pulling tighter and tighter. Karoline's hand, resting lightly on the podium, curled into a fist before she released it. She had two choices: engage and give the story oxygen, or end it. She sighed, and then she did something no one expected. She looked towards security. The movement was slight, but the meaning was deafening. A few reporters inhaled sharply. Cameras adjusted. Someone in the back muttered, "No way." The journalist blinked, caught off guard for the first time. A uniformed officer stationed by the door straightened. He didn't move forward. He didn't need to. Karoline had just shifted the power dynamic entirely. The air in the room had changed, and everyone felt it. The air in the room had changed. And everyone felt it. For the first time, the reporter hesitated. It was brief, just a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. But it was there. The cameras were rolling, microphones hot, journalists on edge. This wasn't just a moment. It was the moment. Karoline remained still. She hadn't ordered security to remove the reporter, but she had made it clear enough was enough. The journalist sat frozen for a moment, processing her options. A choice had to be made: push forward and risk losing control of the moment, or pull back and try to reframe the narrative. Her lips parted slightly, as if she were about to speak, but no words came out. She knew that if she kept going, it wouldn't just be Karoline making a statement. She would become the story. She inhaled sharply, glancing to her left and right, as if silently asking the other reporters for reinforcement. But no one spoke. Karoline watched her carefully. She knew this game. She had seen it before. The silence stretched, too long, too tense. Then, the reporter let out a short, bitter chuckle, shaking her head. She leaned back in her seat, arms crossed, feigning nonchalance. "Wow," she muttered under her breath, just loud enough for the mics to pick it up. A few reporters shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The moment had passed, but the tension hadn't broken. Karoline exhaled slowly. She adjusted her stance at the podium, glancing at the rest of the room. She wasn't going to let this derail the entire briefing. "Next question." A journalist in the third row hesitated, then slowly raised his hand. Karoline gave him a nod, signaling for him to speak. And just like that, the press conference moved on. But the damage had already been done. The fallout. The footage spread like wildfire. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Within minutes, the video had racked up hundreds of thousands of views. Clips were edited, dissected, reframed, manipulated. Some showed only the moment she looked at security. No context, no build-up, just the fraction of a second that made it seem like she had reporters removed for asking questions. Others played the full exchange, painting a different picture, one of a press secretary holding her ground against a journalist determined to create a spectacle. But the truth didn't matter. The narratives had already formed. Sides were already chosen. #silencing the press trended on Twitter. News anchors debated whether it was a suppression of free speech or a justified shutdown of an unprofessional ambush. Conservative commentators called Karoline a strong, unshakable leader. Progressive voices called her a government mouthpiece who feared real accountability. The reporter herself wasted no time. She was already on primetime TV, retelling the story her way. "I was simply doing my job, asking tough but necessary questions. Instead of addressing them, I was silenced, removed. This should terrify every American who believes in transparency." The anchor nodded solemnly. "Did you feel threatened?" A dramatic pause, a deep breath. "Not physically, no, but professionally? Absolutely. This is an attack on the press." The panel on the news show shifted uncomfortably. They weren't used to hearing that level of honesty. She asked a question, got an answer, didn't like it, and kept pushing. Not for clarity, but for conflict. And the moment she was removed, she ran to the cameras playing victim. That's not journalism, that's activism. Karoline watched the segment without flinching. She already knew the damage had been done. She also knew the storm wasn't over. The aftermath. The days that followed were relentless. Interviews, debates, analysis. Political commentators dissecting every second of the exchange. But something had shifted. Not all at once, but slowly. More people started watching the full clip. More people started questioning the outrage. Karoline, meanwhile, stayed silent. No interviews, no debates. She had made her move, and now she let the truth do the work. But the real question remained. In an era where clicks matter more than facts, where public perception is shaped by headlines, does truth still have a chance? What do you think? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you want more breakdowns like this, hit that subscribe button.